How dare you carry this child into our family? Margaret's voice dripped with venom as her hand whipped across Emily's face. Slap! Emily staggered back, her cheek burning red, one hand instinctively clutching her pregnant belly. But before she could catch her breath, thud. Victor, Daniel's own brother, drove his foot into her stomach. Emily let out a strangled cry, her eyes wide with terror as she collapsed to the floor, desperately shielding the unborn child they so cruelly despised. Around the dinner table, laughter flickered from Margaret and her children, as if Emily's pain were nothing more than entertainment. And Daniel sat frozen, his knuckles white against his wineglass, his jaw clenched so tight it looked ready to shatter. He didn't move. Not yet. But inside, something darker than rage was brewing, something his family would never recover from. Tonight, his revenge would be worse than death. As we dive deeper, let us know in the comment where you're watching from. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you will never miss our next story. Emily wasn't the enemy they painted her to be. She was gentle, soft-spoken, the type of woman who smiled through pain just to keep peace. She adored Daniel, and he adored her enough to walk away from wealth and comfort if it meant protecting her. But his family never saw her as human. Margaret, cold and calculating, looked at Emily as though she were dirt under her expensive heels. To Margaret, love didn't matter, status did. Victor, Daniel's arrogant brother, mocked her relentlessly. Every time she walked into the room, he found a way to belittle her clothes, her accent, even the way she sat at the dinner table. And Claire, the sister, was perhaps the most dangerous. She didn't insult Emily to her face. No, Claire whispered poison into everyone's ears, spreading lies. She's only here for his money. She's manipulating Daniel. You'll see. They had been waiting for the right moment to break her spirit. And tonight, they thought they had succeeded. The dinner had started normally enough. A long table draped in white linen. Expensive wine glasses filled. Silverware shining under the chandelier. Emily had tried to fit in, smiling politely, answering when spoken to, doing her best to ignore the sharp edges hidden in their words. Claire smirked across the table. Emily, do women from your background even know how to host a dinner? Or is that something you never learned? Victor chuckled, taking a slow sip of his drink. She probably thinks a steak knife is used for butter. Laughter rippled around the table. Margaret didn't laugh, but the cold smile on her lips was worse than laughter. Emily's face flushed. She lowered her eyes, holding her fork carefully, forcing herself to stay calm. But the more she stayed silent, the bolder they became. Victor leaned closer, his voice dripping with contempt. You really think carrying Daniel's baby makes you one of us? You're nothing, Emily, nothing. Emily's hand instinctively went to her stomach. She wanted to defend herself, to scream, to fight back, but her voice caught in her throat. That's when Margaret struck. Her voice, sharp as a blade, cut through the room. How dare you carry this child into our family? Then came the slap. The room froze, and before Emily could even breathe, Victor delivered the kick. The air was sucked out of the dining hall as Emily collapsed, gasping, clutching her belly. Daniel didn't move. Not yet. But in that moment, something inside him broke, and his silence was more dangerous than their cruelty. Because Daniel was watching, Daniel was remembering, and Daniel was already planning their downfall. The cruelty began slowly. A jab here, a sneer there. Claire leaned forward with a fake smile, her tone dripping with mockery. Emily, darling, did you even go to school? The way you hold your fork is embarrassing. Victor laughed, pouring himself more wine, swirling the glass like a king mocking a beggar. Daniel could have married a woman with class. Instead, he brings this. Emily's hands trembled, but she lowered her eyes, trying to stay calm. She was used to their insults, but tonight it didn't stop. Claire pushed further, her voice cutting sharper. You sit there so quietly, Emily. Do you think silence makes you look elegant? No, it makes you look stupid. Empty. Victor chuckled, his eyes glinting with cruelty. She probably can't think of anything smart to say. What can you expect from someone who grew up with nothing? Emily's cheeks burned, but she said nothing. She forced a small smile, the kind of smile that hid tears. She thought of the baby inside her, the baby she needed to stay calm for. But Margaret wasn't done. She leaned forward, her voice like poison. You think carrying his child makes you family? No, it makes you a mistake. Emily's breath caught. She pressed a protective hand over her belly, and then the sound that silenced the room. Slap. The crack of Margaret's palm echoed against Emily's face. Emily stumbled back in her chair, her eyes wide, her cheek red with the sting. Her fork clattered onto the plate. But before she could even recover, thud, Victor's shoe connected with her stomach. Emily screamed, folding over instantly, her arms curling protectively around her belly. Her breath came out in short, panicked gasps as tears welled in her eyes. The dining room echoed with her cry as she doubled over, desperate to protect the life inside her. And what was worse, the others laughed. Claire smirked, covering her mouth like she was embarrassed at the scene but secretly thrilled. Margaret sat back in her chair, satisfied, her eyes glinting with hatred. Victor shook his head with mock pity. You see? Victor sneered. She's weak, pathetic. This is the woman you risked everything for, Daniel. This is your wife? Emily lay on the floor, her body shaking, struggling to breathe, clutching her belly. Her tears streamed silently, her heart breaking. And Daniel still hadn't moved. His silence was terrifying. His jaw tightened, his eyes locked on the family who dared to hurt the woman he loved. Inside, a storm was raging. His grip on his wine glass tightened until the stem nearly snapped. His chest rose and fell as if he were holding back something dangerous, something his family couldn't even begin to imagine. The family mistook his silence for weakness, but what they didn't realize was that Daniel wasn't weak. He was waiting for the moment to unleash a revenge so cold, so calculated, it would make them beg for death. Daniel's family thought his silence meant weakness, but what they didn't know was that Daniel had prepared for this. Every insult, every whisper, every act of cruelty. He had recorded it all. For months, Daniel suspected this night would come. He knew Margaret's hatred ran deep, Victor's arrogance had no limits, and Claire's poison never stopped spreading. He knew Emily's dignity would eventually be dragged across their pristine dining floor. That's why he had wired the mansion. Discreet cameras in the chandelier, tiny lenses hidden in the corners of the dining room, even microphones tucked into the carved legs of the dining table. He hadn't stayed silent because he was weak. He had stayed silent because he was building their coffin. Emily's soft sobs broke the silence as she held her stomach, trembling on the floor. Daniel finally moved. Slowly, deliberately. He placed his glass down, the faint clink against crystal echoing louder than any words. He stood, his chair scraped back, cutting through the suffocating air. His voice was low, steady, and cold enough to chill the room. You've just destroyed yourselves. Margaret scoffed, folding her arms as if her authority still mattered. Don't threaten me, Daniel. This is our house, our rules. Victor smirked, leaning back in his chair. You really think you scare us? You won't do a damn thing. But before Margaret could finish her next sentence, ding. The sound was sharp, jarring. The dining room froze. From the adjoining lounge, the enormous flat screen flickered on. At first, just static, then a clear, crisp image. The chandelier's hidden lens projected the scene they had just lived through. Margaret's slap, Victor's kick, Emily collapsing, their sneers, their laughter. Every second caught in merciless detail. The footage looped again and again, echoing Emily's cry like a haunting refrain. The family's smug expressions drained from their faces. Victor's jaw slackened. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. Margaret went pale, her lips trembling. Emily lifted her head from where she lay on the floor, her tear-streaked face catching the glow of the screen. For the first time that night, she saw their masks break. Daniel stepped forward, his eyes locked on each of them, one by one. "You thought my silence meant surrender, but all it meant was that I was giving you enough rope to hang yourselves." The room was silent now, no laughter, no arrogance, only the sound of their own disgrace echoing through the speakers. And for the first time, Daniel's family realized the predator at the table wasn't them. It was him. Do you think Daniel will forgive them, or will he make them pay? Daniel's revenge was not loud. It was methodical, precise. The same way they had humiliated Emily step by step, piece by piece, Daniel dismantled them. Victor's downfall came first. The footage of him kicking a pregnant woman, his own sister-in-law, spread through his company like wildfire. Board members watched in silence, disgust painted on their faces. Employees whispered in the hallways. The man they once respected was now branded a monster. Within 24 hours, Victor was called into the executive office. No explanations, no second chances. He was fired on the spot. The golden son, the arrogant brother who had always flaunted his power, was suddenly unemployable, blacklisted from his entire industry. And the whispers didn't stop at the office. At restaurants, at clubs, even on the street, people pointed. Mothers pulled their children closer. Strangers muttered under their breath. "That's him, the man who kicked a pregnant woman." Victor's laughter, once so loud, had gone silent. Claire's destruction came next. Daniel knew every secret she thought was buried. Her affairs with married men, the forged documents she had slipped under her father's nose to fund her shopping sprees, and the cruel words she had spoken about Emily when she thought no one was listening. Daniel didn't just reveal them, he released them at the perfect time. On the night of her engagement party, as Claire stood smiling, showing off her ring, phones began buzzing. Screens lit up with screenshots of her messages. Videos played of her mocking Emily's miscarriage scare months earlier, laughing about the weak little wife. Her fiancé's face drained of color. Guests turned away in disgust. By the end of the night, her engagement had collapsed. Her so-called friends abandoned her, deleting her from their lives as quickly as they had once clung to her status. Claire was left in isolation. The whispers of betrayal followed her everywhere she went. Then came Margaret. Daniel pressed charges: assault, endangerment of a pregnant woman. The media feasted on the scandal like vultures. Headlines screamed across every newspaper and TV channel: Society matriarch arrested for abusing pregnant daughter-in-law. The woman who once walked into galas with her chin high, draped in diamonds, was now shoved into the back of a police car. Cameras flashed as she tried to cover her face with shaking hands. Neighbors gossiped, friends cut ties. She was no longer respected, she was infamous. A living disgrace. Finally, Richard. The father who had sat in silence. The man who had watched his wife slap Emily, who had seen his son kick her, who had heard every cruel word and said nothing. His silence was his crime. Daniel didn't scream at him. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't need to. He severed every business tie, froze every account, pulled every string that Richard thought he controlled. Because Daniel wasn't just his son. He was also the majority shareholder. The empire Richard had spent decades building crumbled overnight. Banks pulled out. Investors fled. His name became toxic. Richard, once the patriarch of wealth and power, was reduced to nothing. One by one, they lost everything: their wealth, their power, their reputations. Daniel didn't lift a finger against them. He let their own cruelty destroy them. And in the end, the family that thought they were untouchable were left with nothing but shame. Emily recovered. The baby was safe, and Daniel finally spoke words he had been holding back. "They wanted to destroy you, Emily, but all they destroyed was themselves." Those words were more than comfort, they were truth. The once proud mansion of the family now stood empty. What had once been filled with laughter, luxury, and arrogance now echoed with silence. Dust gathered on the crystal chandeliers. The grand dining room table, the very place where Emily had been humiliated, sat unused, a cold monument to cruelty. The neighbors whispered every time they passed the estate. That's the house of disgrace. A house that had lost its soul. Meanwhile, Daniel and Emily built something new. Not a palace of marble and glass, but a home filled with warmth. A home where Emily's laughter echoed through the halls, where love replaced fear, and where their child would grow up surrounded not by cruelty, but by dignity. Emily would often sit by the window, her hand resting gently on her growing belly, and smile. For the first time she felt safe. She felt seen. She felt loved. Daniel made a vow every single day that no one, not even blood, would ever hurt her again. And the in-laws? They lived with their shame. Victor, once the golden son, now crossed the streets with his head down, hearing the whispers that followed him like shadows. Employers refused to touch his name. His arrogance had bought him nothing but exile. Claire tried desperately to rebuild her social life, but her reputation was ashes. Friends who once clung to her status now turned away. Every new circle she tried to enter already knew the truth and wanted nothing to do with her. Margaret, the proud matriarch, grew old behind bars. Her name dragged through the mud, her face remembered not for elegance, but for cruelty. She had ruled her household with fear, and ended her days in disgrace. Richard, the father, sat in silence in a small, rented apartment. The empire he had built was gone, his fortune scattered, his legacy reduced to dust. He had thought silence would protect him. Instead, it destroyed him. Daniel's revenge was not death. It was worse. It was living proof that cruelty never wins. And as Emily held Daniel's hand, he whispered the words that would define their future. In the end, arrogance crumbles, but dignity survives. If you were in Emily's shoes, would you have endured quietly or fought back yourself? Subscribe for more powerful stories like this every day.